Nepal is burning. In very simple terms, what we're now seeing coming out of Nepal is a story that we have seen earlier as well. Over the last 18 months or so, if you get into a flashback mode and if you refresh your memory, let's say from Sri Lanka or to Bangladesh, you would have probably seen similar pictures. Just look at a common cast of characters, or shall we say, a common story thread. Anger in Gen Z, anger amongst the youth against the government, anonymous youth leaders, people who wouldn't have contested elections in their lives, suddenly becoming representatives of what is being described as mass, large-scale crowd dissatisfaction. Honestly, if you look at an example far closer home, in 2011-12, when Anna Hazare agitation was at its peak in the national capital, we've seen how the youth came forward and we saw how the opposition parties made hay on that agitation, which was supposedly an apolitical agitation. Now, in Nepal, much like what we had seen once, perhaps just a glimpse in 2012, and much later now between Sri Lanka and Bangladesh, a pretty similar strategy is at play. Godi media, a term which is used extensively in India to hit out against legacy media, against so-called pro-establishment media, is back in circulation in Nepal. Just look at the streams of videos, the number of youngsters who are all getting hold of musical drums, creating memes, hitting the streets and saying, we're against Godi media, we're against pro-establishment media. There is this video. Of this young school girl with her water bottle right next to her. Just look at these pictures and ask yourselves, how does a society suddenly get itself to this position where a young school girl with a water bottle next to her is out on the streets demanding action against the establishment? The finance minister of Nepal being beaten up by a mob which is angry. The mob wants street justice. The home minister was forced to resign. The prime minister has now taken responsibility and has put in his papers, Mr. Oli. But could all this not have been done earlier? Or do we say that all this is being done as part of some larger sinister conspiracy? This is where the story of Bangladesh protests becomes very, very interesting. Because when you open the internet and when you hit any website, you will, let's say, look at someone called Sudan Gurung. Now, who's Mr. Sudan Gurung? Sudan Gurung is a well-known activist. Till 2015, he was someone who was making waves for pure public-spirited activism. But unfortunately, in the deadly earthquakes of Nepal, Mr. Gurung ended up losing his child. Since then, something changed, and he started demanding accountability from the political authorities. Today, it is Mr. Gurung who, using his social media, his digital presence, has created an entire uprising of sorts. At least, certainly, he's one of the key players. What could have happened over these last 4 to 5 days that from the government action of banning Twitter, banning Instagram, banning Facebook, YouTube, to now the Prime Minister of Nepal being forced to resign? Who were the forces which were, let's say, managing this large-scale public anger? Large-scale public anger can lead to chaos, I'll take that. But when large-scale public anger ends up leading to a regime change, ends up leading to a situation where top-flight ministers are forced to resign, then that tells you that there is a method to the madness. And that method to the madness is what we in India also need to be wary about. There have been agitations in Maharashtra. We've seen the massive Maratha agitations which have taken place consistently. We've seen agitations of the kinds which were led by Anna Hazare way back in 2012 that we were speaking about. But we've not seen anything like what we're seeing now. The last time the streets of Rajpath or Kartavyapath ended up seeing something similar as far as visuals is concerned is when the unfortunate episode of the Nirbhaya rape case was reported in the national capital. That was a time when the portals around India Gate were surrounded by all youngsters, by activists, and the police was forced to use tear gas shells and cannon shells and whatnot. In India, we need to be slightly wary of what we are seeing unfold around ourselves. Yes, we're surrounded by a hostile neighborhood, Pakistan, which is always on the boil. Now, with Nepal going down this trajectory, the question that we must ask ourselves is this: do we not have an independent social media in our country? I'd like to argue we do. Do we not have similar questions like the ones which are being raised by the youngsters in Nepal against legacy media? Godi media, where did that term come from? Came from India. Do we not have that problem? Of course, we have that problem. Do we not have a problem of this growing, and many would say uncomfortable ease of coexistence between top-flight corporates and top-flight political establishment? Much like what is happening right now in Nepal, much like what had happened in Bangladesh earlier, much like what had happened in Sri Lanka earlier. Hell, a former Sri Lankan president has now been arrested on charges of corruption. Something similar may well happen in Nepal as well. We're seeing what had happened in Bangladesh, where again, cases, allegations of corruption were made against top-flight political functionaries. So to all Indian stakeholders, we need to be wary. We need to be watchful of what is going on in Nepal. Let's not just completely brush it aside and say that this is just an odd group of youngsters coming together. When Gen Z decides to pick up arms, or when Gen Z gets in this kind of a revolutionary mode, you're not talking of the power of a mobile phone. You're not talking of the power just of social media platforms. You're talking of a larger method, a larger, perhaps orchestrated strategy which is at play. And it's that orchestrated strategy that we need to be very, very wary about in India.
शेख हसीना ने चुनाव करवाया जो बिल्कुल मजाक था, चुनाव का झूठा चुनाव था। पाकिस्तान में जो चुनाव हुए बिल्कुल झूठे चुनाव हुए। क्या हम उस रास्ते पर जा रहे हैं?
और जनता कितने दिन तक चलाएगी? कभी ना कभी उनके सहनशीलता का अंत हो जाएगा। और जिस तरह से कल सीरिया से वहाँ के प्रेसिडेंट, क्या उनका नाम, बदर,
देश छोड़ के
भाग गया ना, भगाया लोगों ने,
छोड़ के चल।
कभी ना कभी इस देश में भी एक क्रांति हो सकती है।
लोग बायकॉट कर देंगे भाई, बांग्लादेश में देखा ना क्या हुआ।
If you like this video, you can tell us what you thought about it in our comment section here on YouTube, or certainly try and subscribe to our YouTube channel or our X channel.